Hello. So in this video, I'm going to talk through some guidance for students who are thinking of applying or in the process of applying to Oxford or Cambridge for history. I didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge myself, but I have taught a lot of students who've applied and quite a few who've actually been successful in applications in getting into Oxford or Cambridge for history at university. Before I start, I'm not going to talk about personal statements in this video. I've done another video on personal statements, and I'd advise you to watch that one. So I'll link to that in the description. So please have a look at that one as well, my video on personal statements. So to begin with, I'm going to talk about sending in essays. So before you do the history aptitude test, or before you have an interview, you have to send in some essays. And what I would say is send in essays that you are confident speaking about. Essays are used in the interview to help draw out ideas and expand on your kind of arguments, expand on your historical thinking in an interview. So make sure that you send in essays that you're confident speaking about. So don't send in an essay that you got a good grade on, but you're not really entirely confident in the content. Make sure that you are confident talking about it. And when you are looking at your essay, when you're preparing for the interview, think about what other lines of arguments might there be. Why did you argue the case that you did? What other angles on the essay might there be? Is it something to do with, say, political leadership, or is it something to do with economic history? Is it something to do with the long-term impact of a specific event? Think about the broader, kind of bigger historical questions that kind of underpin the essay, and maybe take some notes on that to help you prepare. Another really good piece of advice I would say is to ask other people, so your friends or teachers or parents, people at home, to read the essays and then ask you about them, because they might come up with questions that you wouldn't think of, different angles on it. So that's what I would say in terms of sending in essays. Okay, so the next thing is the history aptitude test, or the HAA as it's called for Cambridge. And my big advice for this is to look online at past papers and mark schemes. So they're all available online. I'll put a link to them in the description as well, so you can just have a look at them there. And what you should do is work through some past papers, and the mark schemes are available as well. So work through a few of them, have a go at them, look at the mark scheme. What did you do? How did you do compared to the mark scheme? And then maybe have a go without looking at the mark scheme and ask somebody to mark it, a teacher, or if you've got a tutor or just somebody at home, perhaps go through it with you and have a look at how you've done. For these tests, it's not like a regular history essay that you'd be doing at A level. So I wouldn't, I think having a clear structure is important, but I don't think you need to think of like a kind of intro, 3 paragraphs, conclusion. I think it's more open than that. It's really about your ability to analyze sources in detail, making inference. It's not about your contextual knowledge either. So really going through the past papers is the best way to prepare for these admissions tests. Okay, so now on to the interview. So if you get through to having an interview, just some guidance here, and some of these things I'm going to say are guidance that I've had from students I've taught who've gone to the interview, been successful. Some of them haven't been successful, but this is the feedback. So in terms of preparation, reread your personal statement and your essays. And what I would say is go through your personal statement, look at every paragraph and think, what could they ask about this? If you've talked about a book you've read that really opened your eyes to a certain aspect of history, think about how could they ask me about that, and maybe do a kind of spider diagram on that paragraph. Maybe on each paragraph, try and really break it down and think about what questions could they ask. Also have answers to the bigger questions, like why do you want to study history? Why is history important? Again, I would advise, and I always advise people to do spider diagrams, really develop your thinking. If you can, try and do mock interviews or discuss with people beforehand. And in the next slide, I've got a series of questions that I usually ask when I do mock interviews with people. But it's really good preparation, because you will sometimes think of better answers at the end of giving an answer, or perhaps when you've done the interview you think, oh, I should have mentioned this and I didn't. So practice. Try and do that if you can. In terms of in the interview, what you've really got to show is your enthusiasm and interest for the subject. Okay, in all the people that I've spoken to, they're not going to ask you about specific kind of context, specific knowledge. It's more about thinking with history, knowing that you have got a kind of a mind that uses history in a kind of intelligent and thoughtful way, rather than do you know what happened on the 6th of January 1642. They're not going to ask you those kind of questions to try and catch you out. It's more asking you about the process and the kind of analysis of events rather than something really, really specific. So it's about showing your interest, showing your enthusiasm for history. And I've done a video on 5 reasons to study history. Also, my book review of what is history now might be useful here in terms of think about why you want to study history, why history is important. In terms of thinking with history, it's about using examples. Think about what you've studied, what you've read. Don't kind of shoehorn examples in to try and come across as smart, but bring in useful examples. They might ask you about something that you don't know much about, but you could say, well, I don't know about that, but I've studied this other thing that seems similar. Like I said before, it might be about political leadership, it might be about economic history, it might be about the long-term impact of a specific event. So you will have studied those things, perhaps not the thing they're asking you about, but other things that you can bring in to kind of illuminate and expand on your answers. So finally, here are a series of questions that I ask. These aren't the only questions. Usually I also ask questions on the personal statement and on the essays as well. So I definitely do that. But things like, why do you want to study history? What have you most enjoyed studying in terms of A-level and why? Things about, can we learn the lessons from the past? What about different periods of history? And then thinking about university history compared to history at school, I think my answer, I'd probably be looking for something there about the independent work, that it requires lots more reading outside of the classroom. And then this last one about 3 key turning points, a student told me they were asked about that. And I think you should, that's a really good question to prepare. What would you say your 3 key turning points are in political, cultural, and economic history? And when I've asked people that, it's been really, really fascinating to see what people come up with. So I hope that's useful. If you've got any other questions about Oxbridge history applications, or maybe if you've gone through the process and you've got any feedback, anything that I've missed out, please leave a comment. Thanks for listening.